everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your, unfortunately, glowing host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. This week's show is on what starts the deconstruction of your faith, and we have an all-star panel. This topic got so much response from so many great people, I added another show. We will be discussing this broad and extremely deep topic twice. The next show will be on March 14th with a different set of guests. So thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or question. And I keep hearing that a lot of people do, and I still don't see their name, but thanks for the effort. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic, and that this is a safe space. I want to give a shout out to our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Ray, Michelle, and Heidi. Thank you so much for your generosity and support. If you enjoy the show, please consider going to sherrypalace.com and use the support tab. There's literally dozens of ways to support me and the show. But just being here, welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation supports me more than you know. I appreciate you. And because I appreciate you, I have a gift for you. This year, I am working with the Wild Goose Festival. It will be in North Carolina, July 13th through the 16th, and we will be doing a live show there. I'm so excited. If you want to go or plan on attending, I have a discount code for you. It's worth $50 off. Simply use my name. You got to spell it right. You got to spell it right to get the discount, and you will receive a $50 discount off. You can find out more at wildgoosefestival.com. I would love to see you there. So let me know. Go and sign up. It will be awesome. Okay, let's meet our guests and get a little bit smarter. Danae was raised in a fundamental evangelical Christianity, a preacher's kid no less, and she spent several years in ministry herself. She now works with the people in all stages of deconstruction towards spiritual health and wholeness, whatever that means for them. Welcome back, Danae.
Hey.
Next, we have Keith Giles. Keith is a best-selling author of the 7-part Jesus series. He has appeared on CNN, USA Today, BuzzFeed, and John Fugelsang's Tell Me Everything. His latest book is Solo Mysterium, celebrating the beautiful uncertainty of everything, and is available now on Amazon in paperback and on Kindle. Welcome, Keith. Glad to have you back.
Sherry, Danae, thank you so much. Good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
So glad this is going to be an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
And last but definitely not least, we have David Hayward. David Hayward is the naked pastor. After 30 years in the church, he left the ministry to pursue his passion for art. The naked pastor uses words and images to challenge the status quo, deconstruct dogma, and offer hope to those who struggle and suffer under its, and I have a typo, under its hold. David is no stranger to belief systems. He holds a master's in theological studies and ministries, as well as diplomas in religious studies and ministry and university teaching. His art expresses the stories and struggles of spiritual refugees and the independent thinkers who question, doubt, or oppose the confines of religion. Each piece encourages difficult conversations and acts like a catalyst for critical thinking, just like this show. Welcome, David. So glad to have you back.
Hi, Sherry. Hi, Danae. Hi, Keith. Hi, everybody. And that's not a typo. That sentence totally makes sense. But
okay,
I'm going to have to go back and read
it. It kind of stumped me right there. I don't know. So anyway, we talked about this topic a couple years ago when I first started the show, and I wanted to readdress it. I think we've grown in the last couple of years. Things have changed, and so I wanted to talk about it again. And like I said, this topic is hot. So for me, my deconstruction kind of started when I started seeing the God that my mom worshipped as an asshole. I didn't want any part of that. But the real catalyst in the situation was when I found out that the Bible was not the real history book. And that turned everything on its head. It sent me to be who I am today, because I believed so much in it. But there are so many different layers of this, and everybody tends to, while we have a lot in common, they tend to go through their own quests and journeys in trying to find out the truth. So Danae, you're up top. How did you start your deconstruction?
So I actually wrote a series about my deconstruction journey because I felt like, as someone who was going to become a deconstruction coach a few years ago, I should probably know how to share my experience with other people who are sharing their experiences with me. And when I first started writing it, I was like, okay, where did this begin? Where did this begin? And it started so much sooner than I could have ever really imagined. Like
Right.
I was like, my mom went to labor with me at church. So like my whole life has been church oriented. My dad's a minister. I was in the ministry for many years. And so my whole life was really church oriented. But I also have a series called How I Changed My Mind. And when I talk about that from a general perspective, a lot of it's just, I had exposure to different experiences, right? Like I went to public schools, I was in urban areas where I met a lot of people who were different from me. That was my norm. And then as I got older, just people who were different from me in new ways. And so meeting friends who I knew were LGBTQ folks, and meeting people who believed differently than me, who are atheists, who believe in, I actually took an evolution class in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so all these different experiences helped me, if nothing else, broaden my perspective, right? So even while I still believe some of the same things that I had grown up being taught, at least I had a broadened perspective from which I was believing those things. And then the more I heard other people's stories, you start to realize maybe this is an isolated experience. Maybe this is either systemic or, that, LGBTQ folks are born this way, as opposed to what I was taught, which was that it's a choice, right? And so those little experiences kind of chipped away at things, right? And then, being in ministry, you have lots of unique experiences in church that can sometimes make you question things. And then I worked with teens for many years, and teens are good at questions. And teens helped me, I guess, face the fact that a lot of my answers were, I don't know, or I struggle with that too, or I don't like that we believe this either. And started helping me down our beliefs being black and white to recognizing that the world is not black and white the way that a lot of theology is taught, especially just in general churches. And that life is this very multicolored thing, and that you're going to see blue and I'm going to see purple sometimes. But it may be that we're looking at the exact same color. And I think that really helped me in my deconstruction. And then when I finally just left church because of just a specific experience, I didn't realize I was leaving church. I thought I was leaving a church, and I ended up leaving church.
So what you're telling me is that you are a case study for why people are afraid of diversity.
Right. I think so. Like, I think that that's something that's been a really big part of my conversations with other people who are still very evangelical from the churches I grew up in, family, things like that. A big part of my conversations with them has been, I'm not here. I don't consider it in any way, shape, or form part of my job to change your mind. But I do believe that it is my job, kind of, in the people who I have a rapport with, that I have a strong relationship with. It's my job to broaden their perspectives, right? To share the stories that have been shared with me, to share the perspectives that have been shared with me. And if they still have come to the same end conclusion, that's fine. That's their choice. But I want their end conclusion to be based off of more information and broader perspectives, because I think if nothing else, it creates greater compassion for people who are different than you. And that can never be a bad thing. So
information is power.
Yeah. I think
David, what about you?
I missed who that was addressed to. Sorry, Sherry.
I'm sorry, to you, David.
Okay. Where did my deconstruction start? Well, I was born on October 7th. No, it wasn't. But I'm really kind of telling the truth, that even though if somebody asks where was the starting point, I point to the day of my graduation from seminary, when I suddenly didn't believe in the inspiration of Scripture anymore.
Oh, wow.
And I was devastated. Like I graduated from a Bible college with a BA in Bible and theology. I graduated cum laude from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary near Boston in New Testament studies with all the Greek, all the Hebrew, Aramaic, theological French, theological German, everything, and all founded upon the Bible. And it was kind of like the cornerstone of everything I believed, the source of everything I believed, of course.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, quite by accident, I just suddenly started questioning, wait a minute, I wasn't sure I believed in the inspiration of Scripture anymore. And of course, that's like pulling the whole foundation out from under a tower, and everything started to wobble. And I've been deconstructing ever since. So that was for like 40 years ago when I graduated from seminary.
Wow.
And so it's been going on ever since, which leads to my joke at the beginning I was born on. That actually, in my opinion, deconstruction is a way of life where you constantly question everything.
Yeah.
And my beef with the church and religion is that I think we should be providing safe spaces for people to question.
Totally.
And that kind of expansive space where people can question and doubt and change their minds.
Yes.
And so that deconstruction wouldn't be such a thing. I think it's just spiritual growth. I think it's progress. And if we could just embrace that as a healthy reality in the spiritual lives of people, then, we wouldn't be on this show talking about it as, a crisis of some kind.
Yeah.
In the church or in the faith or spirituality or whatever.
Well, there's a meme that goes around that says that people who believe that the Bible is inerrant have never read it.
Mm-hmm.
And deconstruction usually starts by really getting into the faith and doing the nitty gritty and finding where things are bullshit and where they're not. I mean, when I think, like I said, I was 27. Danae, I went to a Christian school. I didn't have, everything was centered around church. So when I found out that Adam and Eve weren't really the first humans and that there were more people existing than the Israelites.
Wait, what?
Wait, hold on a minute.
Okay, Keith, you go.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just laughing.
Yeah, and I was at work when it happened. I had just started this new job, and talk about an existential crisis. Yeah. I just sat there going, oh, I never doubted the Bible. I was taught that it was our history book. It had never been proven infallible. And right there in front of me, it was being proven infallible, or being proven fallible rather.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, what happened with you?
It was a long process, but I think I could point to the beginning of the process for me. I don't think I knew at the time that I was on this journey. That was something that was going to be called deconstruction. I just knew like the biggest, I guess the first sort of like Jenga square that got pulled out of my tower was a conversation I was having with someone, and they just mentioned that the gospel wasn't about saying a prayer so you can go to heaven when you die, and that was news to me. And it was like, oh, Jesus, he never says pray a prayer, raise your hand if you don't want to go to hell. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So that was a big, big shock to me. That was like, I always say that rearranged the spiritual furniture in my life, in my mind. It was just, okay, well, then it was suddenly like, what else am I not seeing clearly, right?
Right.
And then right around that same time, my wife Wendy and I, we had been part of this church plant in a vineyard church in Tustin, Southern California, and we had just read this phenomenal article that was just it was an overview of the early Christian church, like the first 300 years, and just what a radical part of the DNA of the early church it was, caring for the poor and the orphan and the widow. Like all the money didn't go to buy big screen televisions and buy a salary for the pastor, but like actually cared for the people in their community who were in poverty and in suffering. And we were like, yeah, church should look like that. So we left and started a little house church that did that. And I think that was the beginning of it, honestly. Theologically, it was the thing about the gospel, but the thing about stepping outside the covering of a denominational church, and just kind of going kind of on our own, maverick, rogue, just like it created this permission and this freedom for us that we could, there were no questions we couldn't entertain. There were no books I couldn't read. There were no thoughts that I couldn't have. And we had some phenomenal conversations in those gatherings in different living rooms, over the 11 years. That is what led me to eventually say, I don't believe in eternal conscious torment. I don't believe the Bible is inerrant and infallible. I don't believe that Jesus sacrificed himself to appease himself, to save us from himself. Like all those kind of things. And I don't think I would have ever felt like I had permission to challenge those beliefs if I wasn't, outside a denominational structure with some kind of like, bishop or covering pastor, like checking in on me and, hey, what are you doing? And all that. So I think that was the beginning of the process for me.
Covering pastor, holy Spirit. I remember those words.
Yeah, that was early on in our little house church thing. Someone in the group, someone in our group actually, raised their hand and said, well, who's our covering? And at first I was kind of like, well, I didn't think I needed one. I just felt like the Holy Spirit said, do it. So I'm doing it. I didn't think I needed anyone's permission, but I asked around some other friends of mine who are, what's funny is they were all pastors, but I asked like four of them, different ones, that I respected, like, hey, what's this whole covering thing? Do you think I need it? And every one of them came back and said the same thing, which was that the covering thing was nonsense, that it was all about control. The best answer was one of my friends said,
power.
Yeah, it is. It's about power and control. One of my friends just said, think about it this way. If your name was Rick Warren and you said one Sunday, hey, my wife and I feel called to step out and go start something on our own, they wouldn't ask Rick Warren, who's your covering? What they're saying is, Keith, who are you? And we don't trust you. Right.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I think that is what they're saying.
By what authority do you do this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's about this authority and and all that stuff. So,
as a woman, I get that all the time.
Well, one of the things that really did my deconstruction in was I was part of a group that was studying spiritual gifts. And I actually became the spiritual gifts minister as a result of being part of that group, kind of like part of a group saying, how can we do the spiritual gifts ministry for our church that is like sustainable, right? That can actually not fall under its own weight after 6 months. And the biggest solution was there needs to be a pastor who basically coordinates this, because otherwise, unless someone's doing this full-time or part-time, it won't last, right? And so I ended up becoming that pastor. And one of the things that really hit me when we were studying all those things was that, one, spiritual authority in the Bible, the way that the Bible actually talks about authority, has nothing to do with the kind of hierarchy we're used to in our Western world, right? And that was really interesting for me, coming as a relatively young woman. At the time I was 30, and I'm a woman in a denomination that does not like women in any form of leadership whatsoever. And kind of the, I guess the organizational structure we created for the church was that all the deacons would answer to me. Whoa. And that my ministry was the umbrella for all of the other ministries that the deacons were over. That's some messed up spiritual authority and hierarchy for what we're used to, right? But it does fit with the biblical, perspective, depending on your gifts, right? That it's not about who's older, who's male, female. It's about who has which gifts.
What should be.
Oh yeah, it should be, right, according to the Bible. And
I'm just going to guess that wasn't a Southern Baptist church.
No, but it was a Church of Christ. Close enough.
Oh wow.
But it was really interesting, who gave pushback to that and who didn't, right? Yeah. And that experience of me stepping into that role and then also promoting that same concept amongst other ministries. And where did you get pushback and where didn't you? Where did you have people supporting it and where didn't you? Really fed into my deconstruction as well.
Yep.
So I think the four of us, deconstruction is our passion, right? It's where our focus is. It's what we're doing. We're trying to heal the hearts of those that are shamed. For me, my passion began when the church did to my grandson what they had done to me.
Mm.
They judged him at a year old because he was born in sin. His parents weren't married, so that was in sin also, and refused to do a dedication prayer for him. That ignited my passion. That's when I said, no more. I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. You're not going to hurt someone I love ever again. Where did you guys get your passion? Was there a trigger where you went, okay, no more? Or did it just develop because of your deconstruction? Whoever wants to take it. Don't all go at once.
Okay. Keith, I was I was in the vineyard as well. I think you might remember, but
Yeah.
I came late. I came late into the vineyard, and we went to a leadership meeting. I'm in Canada as well, so we went to a leadership meeting in Western Canada, and John Wimber was the guest speaker, and it was towards the end of his life, and he was suffering with throat cancer and stuff.
Oh, that's right.
Constantly having to stop.
Yeah, that spray bottle. Yep.
And it was the first and only time I ever heard John Wimber preach. And other people who were there were kind of embarrassed, and it was not great, but it was monumental for me. It was huge. But one thing he said, he had it on the overhead. He said, the pastor's job is to help people on their spiritual journeys get from their point A to their point B.
Yes.
And I thought, that's what I want to do. That's what I love. That's what I'm passionate about. And so that's apparently what I am still passionate about.
Yeah.
It's been my number one passion for my own life is I need the space to be free to be my authentic self. Whatever that is, I need that space. And I'll keep leaving until I find it. And I have the same passion for other people, that they have the space to be free to be their authentic selves, and they get to decide how to be spiritual. And I'm going to walk alongside you and help you get there. And that's basically what my passion is, because that's my passion for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Keith?
Yeah, I think like David is saying, like my passion is even just now when you said, our passion is deconstruction, I thought, is it? I wouldn't say deconstruction is my passion, but like David said, it's the people who are going through the deconstruction. Yeah. I have a passion to walk alongside them and help them through it. So, because I know I've been through it myself. And when I went through it, I had my wife, Wendy, and she was phenomenal and amazing. She saved my life many times through that process. And we had this little house church group as well. And I think what I learned, because I was deconstructing as we had this little house church community, and those people in that group helped me so much as well. They ministered to me way more. I mean, it was just a beautiful thing. The way they challenged me and helped me see things a different way. And one of the things that I really learned and developed in that experience, and very similar, I think, what you just said, David, we kind of adopted this mantra in our house church community, which many of them, but one of the main ones was that everyone is in process. And we just acknowledged that we were all at a different point on the curve in our own spiritual growth and development. And there was no need for us all to be at the same point. There was no need for us all to be in agreement on any doctrine or theology or anything like that. And no sense of, well, you're the wrong one and I'm the right one and you're just going to catch up with me or anything like that. We just allowed one another to be where they were, and we learned how to love each other where we were, whatever that was. And it was beautiful. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And I got to see the beauty and the power of believers in community with one another, allowing each other to be, on one end of like, I don't know if I believe any of this, to, oh, it's all the word of God and it's all true, and or whatever. I mean, and everything in between, and to learn how to love one another and have community with one another. And again, love and respect one another through that process. So I would say a whole lot of what I now do to help people, so I started the Square One community like 3.5 years ago, and it's specifically for people going through deconstruction and reconstruction. And a lot of what I apply and help people through in that community is what I learned in the house church group. And David, you're one of the ones, I got to shout out to you, my friend. You're one of the ones that I see out there doing it at least kind of the same kind of way, the same kind of mindset that I am, which is like what you just said about allowing people to process their deconstruction at whatever speed or pace or trajectory, allowing them to be where they are, affirming them and loving them and encouraging them wherever they are, that they're exactly where they need to be. Not a lot of people do it that way. Several people in the deconstruction game are like, this is the wrong way and this is the right way and you have to do it this way. And I'm very uncomfortable with that approach. So you and maybe like 2 or 3 other people are ones that I recommend and will say, yeah, that person's safe. Go to that guy, go to this person. And so, yeah, anyway, I guess, sorry, long rambling answer, but yeah, I think for me, it was what I experienced and what I received. Here's the thing too. It's also what I received from those people in that house church community, because that's the way they loved me and that's the way they treated me. And they didn't put any expectations on me. And I know that made all the difference.
I don't think, personal opinion, but I don't think that you can go through deconstruction and still maintain those hierarchies and still maintain those I have to be right. I mean, a lot of people I know left the church just because of that reason. They saw that these people who claim to be infallible were completely fallible. And so to not have an open mind, I don't know. I mean, I think, Keith, what you just said was like kind of the definition of deconstruction. But if you're actually going to go through and take the steps to break everything down, break the dogma down, you have to get comfortable in saying, I don't know.
Yeah,
Right?
well, so I totally agree with you. And without naming names, I will say that not everybody, I mean, I think I always assumed exactly what you just said, because that's always been my assumption. But in my experience, I mean, for example, when I put out Sola Mysterium, several people sort of told me, number one, don't publish that book. And number two, yeah, wherever you're at right now, that's not safe or acceptable. You can't say that. You can't be there. I'm like, well, look, I can't help. This is where I am. And so I agree with you. I mean, as far as my perspective is, yes, yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely right. I've just been surprised that there are, for some people who probably have gone through a measure of deconstruction in their past, sometimes people deconstruct, but then they will deconstruct to a point and kind of stop. Yeah. And then they'll sort of decide, oh, this is good. We're gonna camp here. This is nice. And I mean, so David, I think you know is this as well, because I think we talked before. The number one place I've noticed that is in the house church movement. People in the house church movement have deconstructed one thing and one thing only, and then they have stopped right there and no further, and we're done. But I've also seen it outside of that community as well. There are other people who have deconstructed to a point, and then for various reasons have felt like, well, this is only this far, and then, but then you got to come back, and you got to come back into some kind of.
I think that's because we are so comfortable with that hierarchy, right? Like there's something safe about it, about the known, and and being able to rely on that. And we like knowing we have all the right answers. Yes. And we like black and white thinking when, it serves us, right? But I think what I realized was that for most people, especially if you're in any way, shape, or form marginalized, church is not a safe place. No. And David talked about this earlier, and this has been like one of my biggest, passions over the past several years, even long before I met the church, was that the church should be a safe place for everyone, including atheists. Like people who go, I'm just interested in hearing what you guys have to talk about. Like, I want to learn about religion, but I don't want to be part of it necessarily. Or I want to join this church because y'all are doing good work in the community, but I don't want the religion piece. The church should be a safe place for that, or not. And then, of course, if you are a Christian and proclaim Christ, but don't agree with all of that church's specific doctrine, it's definitely not a safe place. And when I was a youth minister, that was a big deal to me, was that my space with my teens should be a safe place to question, to doubt, to talk about hard things. We don't do a do's and don'ts youth ministry, you're never going to hear a purity class while I'm the youth minister. It's about being able to question. And the whole point is listening to one another and pointing one another to God. That's it. That's all. But what I found was that outside of my little youth ministry, the church is not a safe place.
No.
And when I started experiencing that towards me personally, then it became hard to stay, right? And so I left my one church because it was no longer a safe place for me because of some harassment issues. It was great. And then I just never really found another church, but then also kind of didn't really want to look anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was just burned out. I was also pregnant, and that didn't help anything. I was tired. And, but I lost my entire community, you know, that was everything I had. And so I went through deconstruction alone.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had already been deconstructing like, you know, most of my life, but like the bulk of my deconstruction where it really kickstarted and everything, instead of it just being like one little brick here, one brick here, like the entire tower of faith just crumbled, right? That happened after I left my church. And I went through it alone. And I found, you know, a few little safe places in the cybersphere on Instagram or whatever. And that was great. And I needed that. And I relied on that to survive. But no one should have to go through this alone. No one should have to go through like, it's scary.
Yeah.
And it's lonely. And there's so many emotions. There's so much grief. There's sometimes anger. Sometimes there's trauma. No one should have to go through that alone.
Right.
And so how I came to this was I hit 37 and was like, I have a really motley work history where I just kind of jumped around from job to job every couple of years, which I've loved very much. But I hit 37 and was kind of like, I kind of want to know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I actually want a career now. I don't want to just kind of do whatever comes my way anymore. But I didn't know what to do. And so I had just quit my job at Purdue University in marketing. And my brother-in-law recommended a book called The Clarity Quest to me, which is not overtly Christian, but I'm pretty sure the author, Pamela Amundsen, is a Christian. Just some of the activities she has kind of remind me of things like prayer walks and stuff like that. But so I did this Clarity Quest. It's 8 weeks. The last week, you're supposed to take a sort of this sabbatical trip away from home and finish the last chapter of exercises to figure out the clarity of whatever question you have for this quest. And I literally went to the desert. I decided I wanted to go camping by myself in July in the Arizona desert. I'd never been camping by myself. I'd never been camping in Arizona. I'd never driven in Arizona. I had no idea what I was doing. My mom was afraid for my life. She was saying, do you know how to make a fire? Do you know how to pitch a tent? I'm like, I'm fine. And it was quite the adventure, but it was like one of the most cathartic experiences to date in my life. And I went there and I was really concerned because I had at home, I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 0-year-old newborn baby. And I was exhausted and I was home with them for the summer after I quit my job at Purdue. And I decided, you know, I was going through this clarity quest and I hadn't finished all the exercises. And so I show up for this last week and I've got tons of work to do in this last week to get through this last chapter, this last week of this kind of program. And I just remember thinking, God, I have not put my best into this. And I'm a little skeptical whether there's going to be answers for this for me at the end. Like, I'll get answers, but are they going to be really specific answers? I have too broad of interest, too broad of experiences. I'm not going to get a really specific. I was really skeptical, but I remember just praying on the plane there going, God, just fill in the gaps. Fill in the gaps where I have not done the work. And so I go to the desert and I had some really incredible experiences with God. And at the end, the answer was deconstructionist. That's it. But that was the word that I was left with was deconstructionist.
Wow.
And I remember at the end going, I can't believe I got an answer. But of course, this is my next work. My work, like my heart beats and bleeds for people who are going through this alone. Why wouldn't I do that as my work? Every single thing I've done in my whole life has built up to this work. And I remember being really astonished and in awe that I got an answer. And if anyone asks me, I will almost never say I'm a Christian anymore. Certain contexts, I might say I'm a liminal Christian, but I sure do believe in God. And that experience is the reason I still believe in God. And then of course, you know, experiences since then, but that experience was really powerful. And so I got home And then I got divorced, and that was a whole, side thing. And then I had the opportunity when COVID hit to go, I can do whatever I want now. And I thought, let's try this deconstruction coaching thing. And it's hard and it's draining, but it is just the most fulfilling thing in the world to me.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I think that, and I love this, that Keith, you're right. I was wrong. Deconstruction isn't our passion. It's people.
Yep.
That's our passion, to stop the shame. I mean, my grandson was a year old and they rejected him.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable in church. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
going to church, but they have things they can't talk about in church.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that the biggest thing that should be required in deconstruction, if you're going through it, for the audience out there, if you're pondering it, as well as honesty, of course, you got to find the truth, but the hate and the judgment really should be the first thing that goes.
Yeah.
That needs, and that, when I saw that with my year-old grandson, that was the catalyst for me going, okay, no more.
Yep.
So to see progressive pastors out there still defaming the LGBTQ community, or still holding on to that judgment and exclusivity and division, I think that's the first thing that needs to go. What do you guys think?
I want to tag off of things that David and Keith said just real quick. Yeah. I think the first thing to go is thinking that there's only one way for everybody.
That's right.
And both of you have already talked about that when it comes to like a deconstruction program. There's no one way for anyone to experience this. And we're all going to be in different places. And we're all probably going to end up in different places. And that's a big part of my work is I don't care where you end up. Are you going to end up pagan, still Christian, atheist? I don't care where you end up as long as you are healthy and whole as a person, as long as you have your authenticity, you have your autonomy. I want people to be spiritually healthy and whole and find what I consider to be God, which is the divine love, right? But yeah, I think that to me is the first thing, is that there's a one way for everyone.
I like that. Keith?
Yeah. So your question is sort of like what needs to change in the traditional church?
What is like the first thing people should focus on when they are looking at possibly deconstructing?
Oh, okay. Well, so here's usually what I will say to people, like when they come into my little Square One group. One of the first things I say to them is, in all of your deconstructing of your theology, I highly recommend you deconstruct your need to be right about everything. Because otherwise you're just going to go from, I don't believe this doctrine, but now I believe this one, but now I'm right about it. And I'm going to argue and I'm going to fight and I'm going to, I'm going to become a fundamentalist about this new thing I've just deconstructed into. And then you just end up, and I've done this again, I say this from experience, right? And you feel silly about the second or third time you've changed your mind, on something, but every time you change your mind, you're still right. I'm always right. Every time I change my mind, look at me, I'm always right. But the truth is you're not right. You're wrong. You were wrong before. You're wrong, probably wrong about some things now. And guess what? You're going to be wrong again in the future. So let go of this whole thing about, it's not about being right about anything. And then that gives, it lets you off the hook. And then it also changes the way you relate to other people too. Totally. Like going back to that thing about we're all in process, right? Mm-hmm. So now if I encounter somebody and they believe something that I don't anymore, but I used to, well, that person's not an idiot. I don't hate that person because that was me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? Yeah. And and so actually I understand them probably way better than anything else, because I used to believe that. I believed it for the same reasons they believe it right now. I could probably tell them why they believe it, right? And so again, I don't need to argue with them, and I don't need to change them, but I also don't need to be triggered by that either, and that's not easy to do. It's easier to say than to do, but I think what I try to help people do is it's moving away from that certainty that need to be right about everything, as if, the gospel is about having all the right information. It's not. It's about this transformation process, and the transformation process is not about information being right about everything, right? It's about some kind of connection with God or the divine or with Christ or whatever that is that creates this kind of spiritual transformation within you. That's what it's about. And so I think that's one of the most challenging things for people going through deconstruction, to get. I mean, it's kind of like we were saying, like you were saying today, and we've all said this, David, we've said this, so when we say, for example, there's no one way to do it, there's no one way to deconstruct. Yes, that's right. So that means then that when you're going through deconstruction, your goal is not to find the right answers to everything, because that would only be possible if there was only one way to deconstruct. But we just said there isn't one way, right?
Yeah.
So your goal isn't to find the thing, the way, the path, the right or the wrong way to do any of this. It's like, just let go of that stuff. Don't let that stuff control you or trigger you anymore. And so that's one of the first things I just recommend people do is learning how to embrace mystery, letting go of that need to be right about everything and be certain about everything. And it's a huge paradigm shift, but I think if people can do it, the process will be a lot easier.
I used to be so terrified, and I still am. I don't like being stupid, but I was so terrified of being wrong in most of my Christian experience.
Yeah.
And now it's so freeing to go, I don't know.
Yes.
This is what I believe right now.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, these different things. This is what I believe now. This is what I believed before, but things are changing. I mean, now I reject anything that isn't love-based. I just reject it. I may need to grow on that too and be more accepting. But if it's not based in love, I don't want to hear it. I don't want you to tell me anything about how bad somebody is. I want you to tell me how you're going to love them.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a great thing too, I think, is that for people who are deconstructing, I think a lot of times their struggle to kind of like, well, what should I say about this? And what's the verse I answer if my brother or my dad or my mom ask me, what do I believe about this or that? It's more about wanting to navigate those relationships, where all of a sudden now they want to know, well, if you don't believe that, what do you believe? And prove it to me, like you're kind of winning these little debates around the kitchen table. And just to remember that you don't owe anybody answers. It's an acceptable answer to say, I don't know right now. I'm still thinking about that. I'm still working on that. I'll let you know. I'll let you know where I land if I do. But right now, I'm just not sure. And that's an answer. And that should be good enough.
Powerful. That is power.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a cop out to say that you know something for sure. I don't know almost anything for sure.
Dude, my cartoon today, I do cartoons. One of the themes is Google Translate. So
I love those.
I translate Christianese to English.
Yes.
So I did one today and it was called God Works in Mysterious Ways. That's the Christianese. The English translation was, I don't have a sweet clue what the fuck's going on.
Those are my favorites of yours.
I love that. Right.
So for me, like I often add a disclaimer because we often use the word spiritual because we need a better word.
Yeah.
Because that implies divinity and supernatural and all that. And for me, spiritual does not necessarily mean that directly. It can include that if we want, but it doesn't necessarily have to include that. And I'm kind of speaking in a Carl Jungy kind of way where spiritual we're talking about archetypes and, depth psychology and et cetera, et cetera. So I know there might be some people listening who might be thinking, ooh, I don't like that word spiritual. I don't feel spiritual. I don't want to be spiritual. So when I use the word spiritual, that does not necessarily imply divinity or supernatural. So I just wanted to make that clear. Well, I don't know a better word except personal, inner, spiritual growth, development, blah, 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 blah. And then it gets
Don't say woke.
But so for me, though, the issue isn't, it's really impossible to ask somebody, just stop thinking you're right. I mean, that's just, that's impossible. And
well, let me interject right there because
there's ways to help people go along that journey. Like you're not going to just go, oh, I'm not right about everything, and boom, overnight. But you know that in Keith's group, it's you open up with this is kind of the goal, but it's walking people through that. People need to be through that. You know, like I think about how many people in my life are patient with me. They walked with me as I figured out I'm not right about everything. And the way I used to describe it to teenagers was, let's say this circle holds every single belief I hold, right? And I know that as a human, based on the Bible, that I'm not perfect. And therefore that means something in this circle is not right, or maybe it's not completely right. At least one thing is not perfectly right. And yet I believe all of them, so I think they're all right. And so this is where that open-mindedness comes in, right? Where I know I'm wrong about something and I haven't figured out what it is yet. And the truth is I'm probably wrong about a lot of things, and a lot of things are just slightly off base. But even if it's just one thing and I don't know which one it is, and like that's such a basic way of explaining it. But when you can kind of get that through your head, there's just one thing you're wrong about, it helps you gradually kind of recognize like the open-mindedness of, I'm not right about a lot of things, and that's okay.
Well, for me, it was recognizing that my ego wanted to be right. And that the ego divides everything, right? So it either makes you feel like you're a total piece of shit or that you're the best in the world. So once I realized that my ego needed to be right, I could be wrong, because then I wasn't getting that oh my God, I have to be right, that ego fill. And I could go, okay, ego out of it. I'm okay, I'm wrong. So once I identified that my ego needed to be filled with being right, it made it so much easier for me to go, okay, I'm not.
You know, if I could take just a minute to share a personal experience I had.
Definitely.
Like I'd already said, I lived in the Bible. I still got my Bibles from when I was a teenager, all colored, markered, writing in the margins. And like I can't throw them out because they're part of my history. But and precious part of my history. Like I always say, I wouldn't be who I am now unless I was who I was then.
Exactly.
But I was in theological anguish for decades, trying to figure out what was right and what was wrong, what was true, what was not. How does this fit with this? And it was complete anguish, all the while trying to be a pastor. And suddenly in 2009, I had this sort of a momentous kind of a moment where I just saw the oneness of all things and saw that there's one reality, but there's a million interpretations of that reality and a million apprehensions of that reality and a million articulations of that reality, but there's just one reality. And immediately my mind went to rest. Like I experienced peace of mind like I'd never had before. That was in 2009, and that peace of mind is still there. I'm speaking theologically. I still worry, I still stress, I still all this stuff, but theologically, it went to rest, and theology went to rest. And it's like people getting caught up in theological arguments. I don't care. I just don't care. I don't mean like it's not important. I mean, it's just, there's no investment in that anymore. That's not where the answer is. It's funny, but for me, it's just not where the answer is. So for me, it was sort of a seeing the oneness of all things, and that we're all involved in this oneness in one way or another. And there are better ideas than others, some ideas that are more loving and some that are more hateful and violent and so on. And we need to discern what those are and try to live accordingly. But that sort of transcending of all the duality of right and wrong, truth and lie, divinity and earthly, sacred and secular, all that went to rest. And I think that I think that would be the ultimate goal of deconstruction, was where you come to a place where, and it is deconstruction, where you take apart all the details, all the facts, all the theology, and you see the wide open space like it's supposed to be, and you enjoy the freedom and somehow live in that moment of openness. I think
I love that.
Yeah, like
so actually,
that was more than a minute. Sorry.
That's actually
I'll dock you next time.
Analogy for deconstruction is, and Keith had actually talked about this already, like the way that we kind of have this rigid faith that we don't need to have a rigid faith, right? But I always kind of liked it too. I was taught essentially to have a very rigid black and white faith, right? I am right about this and that's it, right? And so I always liken it to building myself a fortress of faith around myself. You know, my faith was supposed to be this strong thing that was protective of me, protects me against the evils of the world. And so I built this really strong, tall fortress of faith, tower-like, with all bricks of specific beliefs, right? And every single one of those beliefs was foundational and important and a salvation issue. And then when you start deconstructing, you pull out one brick, kind of like Keith said, the Jenga, right? Like pulling out that one Jenga block. And as soon as you pull out one, you have to check out another. And because if you're wrong about one, what else are you wrong about? Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you start doing that, boy, it's not long before walls start crumbling down around you. And I realized that I didn't want to rebuild. You know, I had originally framed deconstruction as, okay, I've deconstructed this wall. Now, whether it's I pulled out bricks and they all crumbled down, or if I was more, I guess process oriented, where I purposely took each one and examined each one and put them in this pile. Like, I'm going to keep these and I'm going to get rid of these, right? Or if, you know, some people, we just take a sledgehammer to it, right? We just start knocking everything down, saying, I'm going to, you know, scrap all of this, right? I've seen all of them, right? And I think that regardless, I had always originally thought reconstruction was figuring out which bricks you wanted to rebuild with, right? Or maybe getting new bricks and I realized I don't want a tower around me. I want something much more flexible that allows for the I don't know, and to allow for, you know, when Keith was saying, you know, we trade in one I'm right for another I'm right? I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want this experience of now I just have another fortress around me, and if I figure out that another brick is wrong, I've got to tear the whole thing down again. Yeah. And so I realized that the experience I really wanted was more like a tent, where it's flexible, it's still shelter, it's still strong, but it's flexible. It's more open to other people. It's not so lonely and isolating. It's nomadic. It can go anywhere with me. Like, I don't have to stay in the same place for the rest of my life. I can go to other places. I'm really big on eclectic and fluid spirituality, where what serves me right now may not serve me in 6 months or 6 years, and that's totally fine. And so I need a spirituality or a faith, or core values is usually what I refer to them as. I need those to be able to travel with me as I go to new places that may serve me better in a few years. I also want something that's big enough to invite people into, and that they're safe in it. And so I think of it more as, what is my foundation I'm going to build on? And I decided my foundation is going to be just generally love. And I see, obviously, love is God. God is love. And so to me, it's still like building on the foundation of Christ. But
I think anything that builds, that tells you, causes you, influences you to build a wall of anything around you is bad.
Yeah. And some people might, and if that's how other people want to reconstruct, and that analogy serves them well,
it works. It totally works.
It's totally a great analogy. I was an architecture major. I love building analogies, but for me, I realized I wanted something that was more flexible, more nomadic, and that allowed for those I don't knows, and allowed for me to stitch in and change things very easily. And allowed for even my core values. Like, my core values are like, you know, the poles of the tent, right? Even my core values are not that difficult to change out if I really think it's important. They're harder to change out than other parts of the tent, but I can change those out way easier than a brick in a wall, right? Mm-hmm. So that became kind of my analogy for myself and what I share with others. And I would say, you know, you can pick whatever foundation you want, but it's the only suggestion I will make for someone else is that I personally recommend that everyone choose love as their foundation. I think it's universal and without agenda. And whether you see that love as divine, God, source, universe, whatever, up to you. I see mine as building mine on, you know, like the solid rock of Christ kind of thing too. And still love that analogy, but regardless, love. And other than that, you get to pick everything else you want yourself, and you can change it as needed.
Even the rock will shake with an earthquake.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the tabernacle versus the temple.
Yes.
The tabernacle was portable.
Yes.
And nomadic, but the trade-off is that you're living in the desert.
Right.
When you're
one. I think it's beautiful.
Arrived. Hold on. The temple is you've arrived. You've arrived. You're established now. You're organized. You're now an institution. And I think that's a temptation of a lot of people who are deconstructing, is they don't like the wilderness. It's really, really hot. It's really, really dry. It's really, really dangerous. And people just want to settle down somewhere. And so a lot of people do. They settle down and they establish and they build and they organize. And here we go all over again.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good cautionary thing, David, because I think if we look back in different movements, it's really fascinating to study even just the evolution of any movement, political movement, art movement, religious movement. They all follow the same kind of patterns. And deconstruction now is still in this sort of Wild West phase where it isn't perfectly defined. There isn't one single leader, telling everybody this is what it is and isn't.
Yeah.
And so this is the phase where it's kind of like all the exciting things happen, all the cool things happen, because no one knows exactly what it is. And maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Where are we going? We don't know, but it's going to be cool. Let's keep going and let's just see what happens. But the danger is at some point in the movement, once people go, okay, here's what it is, here's what it isn't. And then we establish something and we build something and we brand it and we sell T-shirts and hats and keychains and
ruin it all over again.
And then by the way, this is what happened with the emerging movement. If anybody's old like me, if you remember the emerging church movement, that same kind of thing. It started off cool and exciting and different. No one knew exactly what it was. There were emerging churches that looked like everything from like Gregorian chant and candles and and things like this to like just free and open kids running around crazy everywhere and guitars and drums and tambourines and everything in between. And all of that was emerging because no one had decided what it is and what it was and what it wasn't. And then guess what? People branded it, they incorporated, and then they defined it.
And then it died.
That's exactly what happened. And so I think that's a cautionary thing, is that we have to be careful not to, or at least just to be aware of it, of the process. I mean, and even going back to, rewinding a bit to what you were saying too. I don't know if you guys are familiar, and hopefully, forgive me, I hope this doesn't take us down a rabbit trail, but I'm just in the process of writing a book about some of this right now. And if you ever look at something called spiral dynamics, it's really fast. I highly recommend it. There's a book called Spiral Dynamics you can read. There's one called Integral Spirituality by a guy named Ken Wilber. That's really fascinating.
Okay.
And they both kind of play off the same sort of model. And it's the short version is that it looks at stages of human consciousness and development. And we can go back to the Stone Age, all the way through the Bronze Age, and then Industrial Age, then the hippie movement, and all the way to where we are now. And what we can see is that human beings go through these stages. We can see we've done it. And the good news is that we're headed towards a higher level of consciousness, which eventually becomes something really close to what Jesus and Buddha and Black Elk and Rumi and all these other people, all the mystics were talking about. And you can also in your own individual development can see how you've gone through those different stages as well, the same stages. But there's one stage near the end, and we're not there yet as a society, as a humanity, but we're getting close, which is kind of cool. We're at the stage just before this next one. And this next stage, which is the yellow stage, is the stage at which you're able to step back and realize that this is why we are the way we are, that human consciousness does have to go through each of these stages. It kind of, in many ways, you could say it mirrors a deconstruction process too. And so what you do is when you hit that yellow stage and you're able to step out of this thing and realize, oh, it's a thing. And yeah, I see how I've gone through it. And look, people are going through it here. And oh, those people are at this stage and they haven't yet moved to that stage. And these people are, on their way to this one. And even just the power and the ability of that stepping out of it to then look at it and realize it is a thing and you're not controlled by it anymore, right? You're not being carried along by the stream anymore. Like you're able to step out of the stream and look back and see, oh, that's what's going on. And so what struck me about that whole dynamic was that maybe the goal isn't to get everybody to this ultimate stage of enlightenment, which would be great, because there's this sort of pre-stage, which is just helping everybody realize that there's this thing that we all go through, right? Just to even be aware of these things. And so maybe in some ways the thing is to just help people, even if they're, in the middle of the process or they just started the process, it's still helpful if you could just take them and show them, you know what I mean? And help them understand that there's this thing that we all go through. in our development as human beings and our levels of consciousness. And that can be super helpful. And so in many ways, I think that is what deconstruction is for a lot of people. I think the short version is just saying they see the bullshit.
Awareness.
Yeah, they're aware.
That was a resounding word as you were talking,
that's right.
Become aware.
It's kind of like when
right as before you even said the word hippie, I was thinking of the hippie movements of the 60s, and they're now boomers.
Yes.
They've
kind of gone back.
And they became the boomers because of a lack of awareness. I'm not a boomer. No one on the show's a boomer, so there we go.
Yeah.
David, what do you want to say?
Of taking the personality test I took for the first time when I was like 25 or something, and I realized I was an INFP, and that I was okay. I was, I'm normal. I'm not a weirdo. Blah 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 blah. Danae,
Yes.
I was making a point about tabernacle versus temple, and you wanted to say something, and I.
Oh no, I've always said the same thing, that like God in a lot of ways preferred the tabernacling, right? Like he preferred camping with his people in a lot of ways. And I personally, so this is one of the reasons I went to the desert. I'm obsessed with the desert. It's my favorite place on earth. I love it with every fiber of my being. And when I say desert, I mean high desert. So it's not quite as hot. You do have some coolness, especially in the evenings. But I love the rawness and the vastness of it. And I think that a lot of it is, can you find beauty with where you're at? So, we look at the wilderness as a bad thing because of biblical narratives, right? When you come from Christianity, right? We look at the desert and the wilderness as a bad thing. And for all the reasons you mentioned that are good reasons to not like it. It's hot, it's dry, it's dangerous. Those are good reasons to not like it, right? But it's also beautiful. And there's fun to be found. Like if you like to climb or like to paint or like to, make things, there's so much that can be made in the desert that can't be done anywhere else. And it's just vast and beautiful and raw. And to me, I just always experience God when I'm in the desert. It's the place that makes me the most. And so to me, the desert is like the best place to end up, right? And it's not that I never want to see green trees again. I'm from North Carolina. Green trees is my life, The ocean is where I grew up. I grew up in Wilmington. So it's not that I don't love those places, but I'm okay with being in the desert. And I think a lot of it is, can you make peace with where you're at? And it's okay when you're deconstructing to be in the desert, and you can make a beautiful life there for however long you're there. But if you build a tent, you can also take it other places too and go camp in the mountains.
And I know that Carl and Laura Forehand are sitting there going, we rode out into the desert.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour, and I am so glad we have another show on this because it's just not enough time. Danae, any final thoughts, and where can people find you?
Final thought is that if you're going through any form of deconstruction, whether you're at the beginning or the end, you do not have to go through it alone. Obviously, the four of us have gone through it and are always going through it. And you can find any of us online. And we, like we said, this is our passion. Our passion is you. And I'm walking alongside of you. We're not here to be teachers. We're here to be your companion along the journey. And so as far as where you can find me, my website is deconstructioncoaching.com. And on Instagram, you can find me at d.constructionist.
Perfect. Thank you so much. David, any final words, and where can people find you?
Buy my book.
You should have sent me one. I would have held it up and did a whole banner away.
Like this. So I make deconstruction funny. No. I love drawing cartoons and painting, and I love writing and making videos and talking with people and speaking. But deconstruction for me, like I've said before, is just spiritual growth, and let's be happy. I mean, nobody's got a gun to your head. You're not going to hell. Nobody's judging you. You're not being condemned. Just enjoy your life. Buckle up, wear a helmet. But this can be fun. Like seriously, that's one of the things I learned over time, even though there's dark valleys and dark night of the soul and all that kind of thing. This is how we grow. It's just growth pains in the spiritual realm. And so you can find me at nakedpastor.com. And from there, I'm on social media as Naked Pastor. It's important that you keep Naked Pastor as one word. If you Google Naked pastor, you're going to see things you can't unsee. And so, but I have a gay pastor on every platform you can think of at this point. So, thanks for having me on your show, Sherry. It's been fun. You're doing it right now, aren't you?
No. Don't do that.
Oh my God. I remember when I was writing my book, I looked up, what was it? Reindeer sex, I think, is where I went to, because they have a huge gay population. My eyes are still burning from those in my mind. I had no idea it was a gay term. And yeah, anyway. Sorry for that segue.
All these little tips for your users to check out.
Yeah, all these little Google things that are going to start going on now. Yeah, Mike says TMI. Keith, where can people find you, and what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, well, final thoughts, I'll say deconstruction is something, I think, again, no one plans to do it. It just happens to you. That's, again, we didn't talk about that, but anytime there's anybody, you see a video from anybody saying, before you deconstruct, think about this. Like, yeah, no, I didn't. No one gets to think about anything before they deconstruct. You're just already in it. So anyway, if you find yourself deconstructing, to recognize that, like David was saying, this is normal. I think it's what Jesus was talking about, metanoia, think different, right? Change your mind, think differently, rethink everything, all the status quo stuff, especially all the religious stuff. So, and the good news, I think, for people should be that who are going through it is that you get to move into this, what we call reconstruction, or what I call reconstruction, in the sense that you get to decide what makes sense to you, right? You get to decide where you are, and no one else gets to define that for you. Yeah. And that's exciting. I think, to be at a place where now you are the one that decides what spiritual practices actually make me feel closer to the divine. And if it doesn't, stop doing it. No, you don't have to have a quiet time or whatever, like stop it. Just do what works and what makes sense, right? There you go. Don't let others decide how you should be spiritual. That's your job. That's right. See, David and I are on the same page there. I totally agree.
We all are on that one.
Yeah. And so anyway, if you want to keep up with me or stay in touch, my blog is keithgiles.com. That's my Patheos blog. The Square One course that I run, it's starting up again in April. So if you'd like to talk to me about that, I have discounts. I have sponsorships for people if they can't afford it. I'm happy to talk about that. And what else? Yeah, my books are on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, paperback. Go check them out.
Keith, if I can just say, Keith's books are really, really helpful. Like when I get a lot of people messaging me.
Thank you.
They're saying, I'm really still scared of hell. Mm-hmm. Go read Keith Giles' books on hell.
Thank you.
Or this or that or the other thing. Like he's just really good at providing resources for deconstructing certain beliefs that have been harmful and traumatizing. So yeah.
Thank you, David. Yeah, that's why I wrote that series. And yeah, there's 7 of them. So each book kind of deals with one kind of aspect of the deconstruction process. So thank you very much.
And Danae, I'm going to remember that you're a deconstruction coach.
Yes, I can recommend people, send them your way.
Absolutely. I love collaborating with my fellow deconstructionists.
Awesome.
Mutual admiration society going on here. You guys, this was an amazing show. Thank you so very much. I'm going to send you backstage, close the show, and I'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
I loved that. 3 distinct voices coming together and really focusing on the humanity and love that everybody needs. Wherever you are in your journey, wherever you're doing, just make sure that love for your neighbor is your foundation. And so next week, we actually have a very interesting show about hobbits and the wisdom of the hobbits. So we've got a phenomenal panel for that show too. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, always walk in love. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.